Hello, my name is MG Leonard and I'm here at my local RSPB Nature Reserve, Pulborough Brooks, and I want to show you a hide. Now, a hide is a building from which you can watch birds without disturbing them, and also you can shelter from the elements. We're going to have a look into the Westmead hide. That's the one that looks over the wetlands, just this way.
Today I'm speaking to the lovely Anna.
So hi, yes, I'm Anna. I've been lucky enough to work here at Pulborough for 15 years, so doing a whole variety of things. I get to run great events, I get to do survey work, and generally just talk to lots of lovely people who come to visit us.
So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the birds that you've seen here this spring and what you're looking forward to seeing in the summer, because obviously you see different birds at different times of year.
Absolutely. So yes, at this time of year we're really looking at some of our breeding birds. So wading birds who have long legs and they sort of go around the edges of the pools probing in the soil for tasty worms and other kind of creatures like that. And they'll be breeding sort of out here on the wetlands. So there's lovely lapwing, lovely sort of black and white birds with this really funky crest on the top of their heads, and red shank who've got bright red legs, hence the red shank, shank meaning leg.
And do they nest around the water or?
Quite neat, and they nest on the ground, so they're really sort of vulnerable. But yeah, they just dig a little sort of scrape in the mud and lay their clutch of eggs on the ground. But then they're really protective parents, so if anything that they think might be a threat comes over, they sort of all start making a lot of noise and flying around and really trying to get rid of anything which could be a danger to their eggs and their chicks.
And that's why it's quite important, I guess, for us to be in a hide to look at them rather than walking around like across the land, because we might do damage.
Absolutely, and they could be easily disturbed, or yeah, you could trample the eggs if you were really, really unlucky and just exploring without sort of sticking to the main paths and things. So a hide's a great spot just so you can be quite secretive and you can be quite quiet and you can watch them without them knowing that you're there.
Now, am I right in thinking that many birds lay their eggs at the end of spring, early summer, and sometimes have more than one clutch of eggs? Is that the correct term?
Clutch or brood, yeah, whichever term is fine. Yeah, so some birds will just have one precious clutch of eggs, and they'll lay that sort of in the mid-spring, waiting for whatever they want to eat to hatch. So things like blue tits that a lot of people are going to be familiar with, they kind of time laying their eggs, so when there's going to be lots of caterpillars on the trees that they can feed their young.
Clever.
Whereas other ones, they might have sort of, if it's a good season, if it's a nice spring, not like today when it's wet and windy, they might have several broods, several clutches of eggs in the season. So yeah, you could get young birds, appearing from kind of beginning of May, but right the way through until sort of July, August. You could still be seeing sort of young birds and busy parents feeding very noisy, demanding chicks.
I have heard quite a lot of people saying that the bad weather we've had this year is not good for migration patterns. Does the weather affect migration?
It can do, yeah. It can certainly hold birds off. So this spring we had quite a lot of northerly winds in April when a lot of them would normally be trying to arrive, and they'd be coming from the south, so from Africa, so south of the Sahara, and making that northward journey. But of course, if the wind's pushing against them, really, really hard work for some of these quite small birds to fly those long distances. So a lot of our birds are quite late this year arriving, but they've all arrived now. They're setting up, they've been singing away, trying to find a mate, and looking for their own little patch to nest in.
And is it a good time of year to start bird watching? Because I would imagine that like the spring is when lots of new birds are arriving, and obviously the dawn chorus gets louder. If you were going to start bird watching, would you recommend spring as a good time of year?
It's a lovely time of year. It's really exciting because you never know who is going to arrive, and you've got all the bird song as well, and you might be able to see things a bit better before all the leaves come out on the trees. But it's also quite tricky because you've got all of these new birds arriving. So perhaps try and start in sort of autumn or winter. There's slightly fewer birds to choose from, which can make things a bit simpler.
So what's the interesting thing about autumn? Because obviously that's when a lot of birds leave, isn't it? That's when they migrate back to warmer climates.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of our birds have been here and they're breeding. Gets a bit too chilly for them. There aren't so many insects around, so they're going to fly south, so it's nice and warm and sunny, and they're going to spend their winters in sort of Africa or around the Mediterranean. But we also get an influx of birds coming to us from colder countries, so from the Scandinavian countries, so Iceland and Sweden, Norway, that kind of place, and they come here because it's sort of dark 24 hours up north, and it's really, really cold and icy, so they come here where it is relatively balmy to spend their winter with us here.
So what kinds of birds might come here then? What types? There won't be songbirds, I would imagine?
Not so many, no, but we get a lot of water birds, so particularly here where we've got the wetland habitat that we're looking at here, it's a great home for all those winter ducks and geese. So, you know, if you were to come here in, let's say, December, that water, there'd be more water out there, and it would be covered with different kinds of ducks, so lovely widgeon or lovely sort of chestnutty coloured ducks who whistle rather than quack, which is a lovely sound, and lots of noisy geese and things like that will be coming for the winter because it won't be frozen here, whereas it would have been where they spent their spring and summer breeding.
I go to my local nature reserve and I've never done any bird watching before. Should I try and find a hide, or what should I do?
So the best thing to do first is check in at the visitor centre, so there'll be people there to welcome you and maybe tell you where the best spots are on any particular day. But hides can be really, really good places because we put them in places where you're likely to see some really good wildlife, so on the edge of the water or near some bird feeders and things like that, so they're always good places to go.
Are there any rules about being in a hide? Like, must I be silent?
You don't need to be silent. Being, you know, a little bit quieter can often help because you're trying to be sort of keep yourself sort of secreted away really from the birds so they don't notice you're there and you're not going to then disturb them. But you can talk to your friends and your family when you come in. That's absolutely fine. But no smashing of doors and banging of windows and things like that. But yeah, you just want to come in and sit and have a little look out the windows. And there's often things here to tell you what to look for. So there might be a sightings board, or we've got some really good panels which tell you the different birds you might see in different seasons, so you can look at the pictures and look out the window and try and match them up and see who you found.
I have noticed, just looking out these windows, that I can see the birds. They're quite close, so I wouldn't even need binoculars, although they might help.
Yeah, binoculars are always helpful, but a lot of places in nature reserves will hire binoculars out to you, so you don't have to have all the kit to come out and enjoy it. But just seeing and watching how they move around and things like that, even if you can't see the really, really tiny details, you can watch how they're swimming, how they're feeding. So we've been seeing swifts, so lovely birds who are really swooping low over the water, and you can see them without binoculars today.
And if I see something and I don't know what it is, I guess I could always just ask one of the people on the reserve.
Absolutely, everyone who comes here are really friendly. We've got special volunteers who'll come in and help, but all the other birders, sometimes they like showing off a little bit as well. So if you ask them some questions, they'll almost certainly be happy to tell you what they've seen and help you identify the birds as well.